Productive Pastor 129, Deliverability versus Visibility. What's up, friends? It's Chad. We're back for another episode of Productive Pastor. And I've learned something over the last few years on my primary YouTube channel where I make videos with the Bible, the spiritual life, and pastor stuff. Where every now and then people like what I call a channel chat video, and we're doing a channel chat podcast that's also going to be a video, but there's a reason for it. And so one, I've been thinking over, the last several months have been really busy. Back in March, I kind of quit doing the standard weekly episodes of the podcast because so many things were going on at work. Working full-time in a conference staff in the Louisiana Conference United Methodist Church is a lot of work. It's busy, and I needed to focus 100% on that. I also had my first book come out in May. That was getting my extra time because I realized that was like the most important thing for me to be doing in my off hours. But over the last few months, as I've been thinking about all sorts of things, and really over the last couple of years, as I've been thinking about the state of social media and what that looks like, I've been thinking about Productive Pastor this whole time because some of y'all have been on board for over a decade. This podcast and the community that's grown around it has gotten really, really big over the years, but it's ebbed and flowed. Remember, there was a previous era of the podcast that had right around 100 episodes, and I took it all down in about 2018, 2019, and then we kicked this back up in 23. And we're 129 episodes deep, a bunch of courses released. I've done a lot of coaching, all that sort of thing. And I'm not looking at Productive Pastor vocationally right now, but I realize how valuable this community is for the other things that matter a lot to me. Because one of the things that just covers over my understanding of the ministry vocation is resourcing pastors in churches. I love it. It gives me so much energy, and it makes my day job better and easier in some ways. So I've never quit thinking about Productive Pastor. And I talked about going video forward with things. I still have plans on that. That's a lot more work than I realized it would be as well, especially when you involve every other guest. And I've got that stuff in the can. But really over the last month or so, I've been thinking about this issue of deliverability versus visibility. And this isn't just an update for you on the channel. I also think there is a significant thing here to learn about your church's communication and the way you communicate with people, not just social media, but communication everywhere. And what's growing in my own understanding of things is in this, the 2020s forward, and it was doing it before COVID, but it's especially true over the last few years. In the 80s and 90s and 2000s, back when churches were just absolutely blowing up, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail right now of why that was happening then, program ministry was really the most important thing your church can be doing. And I full tilt believe right now that your communication ministry is the thing that you have to be focusing on the most right now. But in so many churches and situations, what I see churches doing and pastors doing is really kind of spinning out in not unhealthy ways, but in unhelpful ways. And a lot of what I've learned over the last year about visibility versus deliverability would really apply to your local church. So I'm going to walk through some of the things that I'm thinking about and how I'm doing things right now versus how you might think about this as far as your local church is concerned. So let's go into this conversation about deliverability versus visibility. When social media kicked off, I was one of the first, I think, 150 users on Facebook in college, back when you had to have a .edu account. I remember when Twitter came out when I was in seminary, and me and a bunch of my friends and some of our bosses and some of our teachers jumped on it in those first, few months after South by Southwest, when Twitter started getting really, really big as an app. I'm pretty much an early adopter in most forms of social media, and I've always instantly used social media to drive people towards the other things I'm creating. And there was a point in time where that was really, really valuable. In the previous era of Productive Pastor, I was able to build up a massive email list through what's a lot of people call a lead magnet. And that first lead magnet was my day sheet, which I still make now and I still have versions of and I still give away. But it was actually kind of easy. It was you. This is how it worked. You talked about your podcast or your blog posts on social media. You linked to them. People clicked the link to go read the article, and baked into the website was a pop-up. We've all seen pop-ups that give somebody something for free. I guarantee you have filled out at least one of these somewhere before. And, when I shut down the podcast in 2018, 2019, I also deleted the email list. At that point in time in my life, I don't need the temptation to do any of this. So I downloaded the email list, shut down the account, and I thought I had that email list sitting somewhere, but I lost it. That's all right because we've rebuilt that in the last few years, but maybe to 25% of where it used to be. But this worked great. And local churches did this sort of thing. Back then, if your church made a post on Facebook through your church's page, a decent amount of the people in your church would see it. And the more people liked, commented, or shared, the more Facebook just opened it up and opened it up and opened it up and let more people see it. When we planted a church in 2014 and 2015, we were able to get a huge amount of visibility in our community through our Facebook strategy, which was really, really good, especially for a little small upstart. And we had a couple of funny things happen to where we realized that our Facebook traction in our own mission field was not only pretty much bigger than almost every other church around us, it gave us the name recognition. So when people showed up on Sunday mornings, back when we were portable in a gym, rolling the trailer every Sunday morning, they walked in and they thought wow, we thought y'all were a much bigger church because your social is so good. Twitter used to work the same way. There was not an algorithm. At first, it was everybody saw everything. And then slowly Twitter did this thing where they would drip out stuff more to be liked, comment, and engaged. But nowadays, Facebook has gone, has a very specific algorithm that's based on human emotions. And it's also a pay-to-play game. That if your church is releasing a Facebook post, there's a really solid chance a single-digit percentage of people is actually ever going to see that. I tell this to pastors all the time, and they're kind of surprised because they really thought that that Facebook post they made about an announcement or whatever was going to 100% of the people. Twitter is just an absolute dumpster fire right now. I'm still enjoying it. There's still some fun people to follow. A lot of y'all interact with me on Twitter. But I can just tell looking through accounts, 18 months ago, we're getting significant traction and views on Twitter. And I know my own account, has been the same. Twitter is also really deprioritizing. If you're sharing a link in a post, they're really not going to, put it in front of people as much because they want to keep people on the platform. So there's all sorts of workarounds for that. But social media, traditional social media, has a really bad visibility right now. You used to be able to do a lot of great things through social media and get that visibility. And now it's Hartmut Rosa's principle of social acceleration. You have to work 20 times harder to get the visibility that you used to get back in the day. Now, I will fully admit I've got a little bit of a gonzo strategy on social. There's a lot of people who do a lot better of a job at it than I do. They're a lot more tactical. All these things that you figure I would really be into, but it's never been my jam. And so there's a visibility issue right now that's going on. And then the deliverability thing, this is where you have the best expectation that they're going to see and engage and interact with stuff. And that all boils down to subscription, that people have to subscribe in some way. So if you subscribe to the podcast, first of all, thank you. And this episode's actually going to be a little bit of an experiment because I'm not going to broadcast it for a few days. I want to see what just the native subscription rate looks like. So subscribing to podcasts is a really big thing. Also, if you subscribe to an email list, that's a big thing. There's about 700 people right now on the Productive Pastor email list, and even that's changed. It's not been going as regular as it used to, but I've been irregular before in the past, and open rates were significantly higher. Now, I think this is a lot more to do with me and not with Kit, my email platform. That goes back to Chad's gonzo practice that it's a thing I do. And I'm all right with it right now, especially because this is back into hobby mode completely. And so there's always going to be some deliverability issues, but subscriptions really are the best thing to do. And so this is what I'm going to do going forward with Productive Pastor. And this is where I think the lesson might be for you to think about in your church. And I will talk about that after I've kind of explained this pathway in this system. And so for my visibility, I realized the absolute best place that still works in an old school social media, like I think people are going to like this and there's not any weirdness applied to the algorithm, honestly, is YouTube. Like Twitter and Facebook are just simply not going to cut it. There's a lot of people that have been exploring this sort of thing. And really, there seems to be two major visibility places left on the internet. And one of them I don't think will really work for Productive Pastor. Especially moving a legacy community onto it doesn't really work very well, and that's Substack. But there's a lot of people that really will talk about like how much traction they're getting internally on Substack, who's built up a very good, like it almost reminds me of old school Facebook, this internal algorithm to bring people to things. But Ryan Berge, one of the best, statisticians understanding church health and church growth right now, will show how he gets like single digit percentages from his massively popular articles coming off of Twitter. It's almost all inside of Substack. So the visibility piece is there, but Substack, it doesn't work for this sort of thing, especially as a legacy community like we are. What I've found, and there's a couple of creators I'm paying attention to, and I've seen people in the last year move off of Twitter to put their primary focus on YouTube. Now, I talked about this in a couple of episodes ago about why I was thinking about going video forward with Productive Pastor. YouTube seems to be like that old school social media that's the most dependable, that you can grow relatively quickly on, but it's all right for longer formed content. You know, this whole iteration of Productive Pastor episodes have always gone to YouTube. And then I started a second channel about 6 months ago for video forward stuff. And the only thing on that channel is Productive Pastor and the stuff I do on normal sized church health. And that without doing that much of anything, we're pushing the number of subscribers on there that I would not be surprised to actually have subscribing through some podcast app. That's one of the reasons I'm going to experiment with this. But visibility is all about YouTube right now. The second thing is deliverability really exists in two places that you can count on. One is email and the email list. And the second is the podcast subscriptions. So that's where your deliverability is going to be the strongest. And so what I'm thinking about doing right now is I have another episode of the podcast coming out in a few days that's kind of back to old school Productive Pastor kind of hack stuff, not so much theory. And what I've decided to do is to start turning those out, because I have a lot of episode notes of things I like to do I've made over the last few months, but the production level was just a little bit beyond what I thought about. And then I realized, Chad, there's also a funny thing going on YouTube where YouTube is prioritizing less produced content. Kind of exactly what you might be seeing here if you do the episode on YouTube. And it's like, okay, Chad, let's just do this a little bit more old school style, a little bit more run and gun, and keep Productive Pastor content going and get it back up to a little bit more of a predictable level. Those episodes will also be sent out on audio through the podcast app. And there's the same thing about the email list that, that's always going on, that's happening, but in a little bit, more low key of a manner. Shooting videos like this using a program called Ecamm Live. It's simply just like I use my iPhone. My microphone's already hooked into the computer. I just hit go. I don't have to set my camera up, lights, all that kind of thing. It just makes it a lot quicker to keep regular content in the loop. Now, we've been talking for a while about this, and I promised you this idea of how this applies to your local church. Let's go into that now. And so the visibility piece for things, Facebook now, about 3 months ago, announced that they're going to start deleting live streams. And so if a live stream has been up there for 30 days, they're going to delete the live stream. A lot of people, a lot of normal sized churches depend on Facebook Live to do their live streaming, which is great and people can go back and see your previous services. But the problem is after 30 days, they're going to be deleted. Now, something I've been telling people to do for a long time, and we started doing when my church started live streaming during COVID, was learning to leverage YouTube. People use YouTube for everything. It's like the second largest search engine in the world. And since Google owns it and they're the first largest search engine, the way they're doing things right now, you might be able to argue that YouTube might be the largest search engine in the world. And what I've always suggested to people is don't put your whole service on YouTube. Putting your whole service on YouTube, folks, I don't know too many people that are going to watch an hour and 15-minute long service on YouTube. What people would watch or listen to, because the amount of folks that just turn YouTube on and use it as a podcast player blows my mind, is to just have the sermon on there and to not title it, Sunday, August the 3rd, First Methodist Church of Normal. Like, don't do that. Your sermon title is a better option. An even better option is to think about what specific question in life are you answering that people might be searching for, and to kind of go in on a YouTube strategy and posting your sermons up like that. That's probably the basic level of visibility. I know other churches that do a fantastic job creating other content on YouTube, but that might be too much for you right now. It probably is too much for you right now. And that's not what this episode of the podcast or this explanation of visibility and deliverability is about. But I don't trust Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok to deliver the things that a lot of churches are counting on. Now, some churches have found some, help on short form social. I don't think the normal size church that is an energy investment that's actually going to pay off. Now, going down to deliverability. Now, this is what I think matters a lot. Now, one, I do think churches need to have podcasts. I would almost argue if your church is under 100 people, that a sermon podcast is more valuable than a live stream. And I'm going to take heat for that, but I'm going to stand my ground on it. And without, much money at all and without a lot of time at all, you could also start other podcasts through your church. And there's some great folks that have done that. There was a great episode of a church technology podcast that talked through this, but I've seen this. I've done this myself. This is a very valuable strategy because remember, deliverability is about subscriptions. So people can subscribe to podcasts. Yeah, you can share the link and you should share the link in other places, but getting them back to that podcast app, wherever people go to subscribe, is going to be valuable. The second thing is your church email list. Church email lists, and I've talked about this a lot in the last couple of years. And there's other episodes of the podcast where I've kind of gone bigger into strategy behind this. But church email lists are valuable because people can subscribe to it. But then also, depending on how it's linked to your church database, you can auto-subscribe people based on their levels of engagement. And so the deliverability feature through two places people can subscribe to, email lists and podcasts, that's going to be a really healthy thing for your church as well. So this is a different episode. But I've been thinking about this for the last few months, and I realized this is going to work for what I want to do and what my current goals are right now, and that there was a direct connection for you in church communication and what this looks like. So make sure to subscribe to the Productive Pastor email list. It will be in the description below, wherever you find this. Or you can go to revchadbrooks.com/PPP/129 to find the show notes for this. So go subscribe to that YouTube channel as well to see the other stuff I do. And also, I've got a book out. It's called Is My Church Healthy? It's been out for a few months. It's had some good sales for a completely self-published, like gonzo style release. I'm satisfied with it. The experiment was great. But I'm Chad. I will see you back in the next episode. Thanks for being part of Productive Pastor.